Hey everyone, I'm Erika Walton, your host, and I'm an entrepreneur with several businesses. One of them is Destiny by Design, a transformational course empowering individuals to take charge of their lives. I'm also a PMA advisor with the PMA Manifesto. We're debunking the top 12 myths of PMAs. Today we're discussing the Amos Miller case, which holds special significance for me and aligns with the principles of informed choices and freedom that I stand for. Being a PMA advisor, I have read the Amos Miller court case. He is not just a farmer. He's a defender of our right to associate and make choices about what we put into our bodies. Our Constitution guarantees these rights, freedoms, and liberties, and that includes our right to eat what we want. Now here's some crucial information. Amos Miller is facing legal challenges in his fight for our food freedom. Please consider a donation or becoming a member of his PMA to support his case. I like to connect this to the Destiny by Design Master Your Life course because it's about taking responsibility of our lives, making empowered choices, and standing up for our God-given rights. It's our body. It's our choice, not the government's. Let's support local farmers and preserve our freedom to choose. Listen to these clips and go support these other channels too. They are giving up-to-date information about the case.
Outside of Amos Miller's organic farm operation here in Birmingham, Pennsylvania, there are currently 2 marked state trooper vehicles here, 3 other official use vehicles. I attempted to enter the building inside. A state trooper turned me away.
How are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good. Are you an attorney or?
I'm with the media.
Okay, all right. We're conducting a search warrant inside this building right now.
Okay.
So everybody needs to stay outside, please.
Okay.
Okay, so turn around.
Can I get access to that search warrant?
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Back to the homestead. As many of you know, Stacy and myself, we live just like the Amish, and we have for 15 years. We live in a log cabin, not like the Amish. We grow 90% of our own food. We heat and cook with a wood cook stove. We have a large Amish community by us. We live 100% off of rainwater. We poop in buckets, and we turn that into compost, which they don't do either. We're trying to get them onto it, but they're still using the outhouses. But we've been up here 15 years, developing great relationships with them. And last year in June, I shared a story with you guys how the federal marshals were raiding Amos Miller's place. Amos Miller, an Amish farmer who runs a holistically managed small farm, bird in hand, Pennsylvania, grows and prepares food in tune with nature, the way he believes God intended. This seems like a sound idea to the approximately 4,000 customers purchases Miller's meat, eggs, dairy products from his private members-only food club. Now, he had to start a members-only food club.
What happened with, so look, everybody knows what's been going on with Amos Miller, Amish farmer up in Pennsylvania, has been, raising, breeding, slaughtering, distributing his own meat to his own customers who buy it in full awareness of fact and law, want the meat that is not jacked up with hormones, antibiotics, all this other crap. The feds come in and say, you're violating the rules of the FDA as relate to slaughter and distribution of meat. And if you don't abide by those rules, you can't sell outside of the state. They can't sell anywhere, basically. They've been harassed for an extensive period of time. You can highlight that. And then, when was it? 2 days ago, they get raided allegedly, or not allegedly. They get visited by who? Feds?
Not the feds. The Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture.
Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture comes to inspect Amos Miller's farm yet again. What happened? I mean, we only saw one video on Twitter. What was the purpose of their visit? What were they there to do? What did they in fact do? And what the heck is going on?
So the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture has been lurking in the shadows behind the campaigns against Amos Miller. We use the Sunshine Laws and the Open Records Act laws that are kind of your state version of Freedom of Information Act or FOIA laws to inquire into about 9 months ago what the state of Pennsylvania had been up to all along during these cases. And it turned out that the state of Pennsylvania started everything. that they didn't like Amos Miller and the success of an Amish farmer and the success of an Amish farmer exporting that way of life to others. They wanted him shut down, but they didn't have any legal basis to do so, and they didn't have the political chutzpah to try it. So they instead referred his case to the Food and Drug Administration on the grounds of challenging his all-natural, non-homogenized milk sales. The FDA looked at it and decided there was nothing for them to do, and they transferred it at the request of the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, according to these files, to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and said, go after him on meat. There's amenable meats, certain things that are governed for under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they decided that they were going to assert control over it, did multiple raids, seized a bunch of meat. And at one point prior to my representation of him, were seeking a bankrupting judgment that would, against he and his wife, that would take away his farm and put him in prison. We ultimately reached a resolution with the U.S. Department of Agriculture that removed all the risk of that. No more bankrupting judgment, no more sentencing anybody to imprisonment, no more contempt. All of it got satisfactorily resolved with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we're still in progress and in process of what else we can achieve in resolution with the USDA so that the private members of Amos Miller, who are the only people he distributes food to, he does not sell them commercially in the open market, doesn't sell them at grocery stores, doesn't sell them at food stands. He only sells it to people that have informed consent at what they're getting. And it's people who want it the way he makes it. They don't want it any other way, whether it's milk, whether it's cheese, whether it's yogurt, whether it's beef, whether it's poultry, whether it's bison, whatever it might, whether it's buffalo, whatever it might be. And the FDA, USDA has worked together to get resolution. And throughout this process, the state of Pennsylvania was often on the phone call in the case when we were talking to the judge about it. And they voiced no objection at all to this process. So then all of a sudden now what has happened is Amos is being successful, that he's able to get resolution, keep functioning. People continue to support him. People continue to like his product. People are keeping him afloat. And consequently, I think the people at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture who have been following these cases in the press, been following me in the press, were unhappy that it looked like Amos would be successful and that more people would get to enjoy the benefits of Amos Miller's extraordinary food. That's the best food I've ever eaten, period. And I've eaten at the greatest restaurants, literally in the world. I've never had a better meal than I had at Amos Miller's. And so, and then you look at the Amish. I mean, this is what's really lurking politically in the background. The Amish are an alternative control group. There is who is it out there that isn't inundated with big food controlled by monopolistic corporations? Most Americans still don't know that almost 80 to 90% of the food distributed in America that we eat come from a small number of big corporations who use every kind of fertilizer, every kind of chemical, every kind of additive known to man. They've been wiping out small farmers all across America and consolidating power, whether it's pig farmers or chicken farmers or cattle farmers. And they've been consolidating and monopolizing their power. There was a little glimpse of this when we suddenly had a meat shortage during the pandemic. It's like, how do we have a meat shortage? It's because at any point in these big supply chains, if there's a problem, all of a sudden that 90% of our food goes away. So Thomas Massey's currently trying to pass the Prime Act in Congress to give more power to ordinary farmers to farm the way they want and the way they have traditionally and the way their customers want them to, and more power to the ordinary person to decide what goes in our body. We pick our menu, not the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who during the time the USDA and the State Department of Agriculture have been picking our menu, we've got fatter, we've died sooner, we've had more disease, we've had all these other problems. We've had a real-life control group over the last half century. What happens when you're free of big food? What happens when you're free of big pharma? What happens when you're free of big tech? What happens when you're free of our educational structure? You get healthier, happier people who live longer lives. There has been no autism explosion in the Amish community. There has been no anxiety explosion in the autism community. There has been no depression explosion in the autism community. There has been no self-harm and suicide explosion in the Amish community. There's been no cancer explosion in the Amish community. So This is for the statists and the bureaucrats and the corporate monopolists. This is an egregious, this is a blaring signal of how corrupt their system of governance has become of our lives.
But I'm going to get to two things I've been pulling up in the backdrop while you talk about this, Robert. It's amazing. First of all, what does Pennsylvania, what does the state want from Amos Miller and all of this? Do they want it to?
They want to destroy the Amish way of life. What made Amos the primary target, and they've lied about this. There was some local Lancaster media publications that were lying about him this week. Great credit to Lancaster Patriot, who covered this extensively. He's doing a fundraiser for him because the goal has been to financially freeze him in such a way that he can't function and has to shut down anyway. And it will take too long to get relief or remedy in the process because the Amish don't sue. This is part of the Amish don't sue. The Amish don't seek publicity. This is part of what makes them vulnerable targets. And the Amish as a whole are so disconnected from what's happening in the outside world and are so good faith in how they Amos treats everyone like he himself is. So he's very trusting towards these people, tries to engage them, tries to work with them, tries to negotiate with them. And doesn't realize how they're acting in bad faith because in the Amish world, that's kind of foreign to their entire life experience, to their entire lived experience. So so what they did is they went and executed a search warrant on Amos Miller's farm. Now, keep in mind, they've known of my representation for years. They were on the phone calls. They never once objected to anything we were doing with the feds. Not once. Number two, they have never reached out to me a single time suggesting they think he should be a registered food establishment, that he should be a licensed retail seller, that he should have a permitted milk selling license. Ever in that entire time period. Not once. And so what they do is they go and get a search warrant, even though Pennsylvania statutes don't give them the legal authority to bring a search warrant. Their search warrant authority is very circumscribed. It says, okay, let's say you have a contaminated animal, and that's what you're worried about. Or let's say it's a commercial feed operation. Selective set of circumstances that were completely inapplicable here. The judge was such a rubber stamp, a pitiful, disgraceful rubber stamp of a judge in Pennsylvania, that the judge didn't even look to see whether the search warrant alleged a crime, because that's what you have to do a search warrant. You have to have probable cause of a crime. There isn't one alleged. There's no probable cause of a crime. And we are going to find ways to seek remedy, creative ways. There are customers that may have a right to sue because they have a possessory property interest as members of his association in that food that was unlawfully and illegally detained. So if they don't release it, we will be bringing civil rights suits related thereto on their behalf, because that doesn't require Amos be a named plaintiff. And we'll seek the release of the product as immediately as possible. We will try to get it independently sampled to make sure they can't lie about them like they're trying to do and planning to do, because the scaremongering is always the approach they take. Be very skeptical of that approach. He wouldn't have the customer base he had if there was ever any problem with his food. Just do the math. Everybody knows it. So that will be a bunch of garbage that they're coming with next. And I'll try to defend him in every possible way. And thanks, the Lancaster Patriot, which covered it, which exposed large parts of it, which Congressman Massey retweeted out, thankfully. There's a great fundraiser going on. I got it pinned at the vivabarneslaw.locals.com board. It's also pinned on my X account at Barnes_law, where you can donate to him. The goal is to raise $150,000 because the scale of his operation is such that that's what he needs to raise to be able to substitute for being put out of business. Not all of he still has inventory. So there's some inventory still out there. So if people like his product, go and get his product. That's another way you can support him. But for all the product that got frozen, that part of his business that got detained, if we're able to raise $150,000, then that will give Amos a 60-day window to be able to stay economically afloat, because he has to pay.
I want to bring up two things, Robert, that I had on the backdrop while you were talking. Listen to this. The average life expectancy for the Amish people over 70 years, while the average American was only 47 during the earliest 20th century. Amish people still have a notable edge in late life health quality with lower chances of serious illness that are very common for the rest of the world. Then you go.
Thanks to everybody that went to the fundraiser to continue to keep him afloat out there, because that's the best way to immediately counter this. If you wanted the legal fundraising is done at freeamericalawcenter.com. You can go there and donate to support the legal fees. I'm continuing to do all that work, whether we get paid or not. Hopefully, I mean, what it is that work went from being a modest amount for the next 60 days to a very large amount for the next 60 days.